Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Rob Sweet. He's been on the podcast before in episode 153 and in 158. Our listeners will recall that he lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is many miles away from the ocean. For those of you who don't know the geography of the United States, he's several hundred miles away from any large body of water in the ocean. So we talked in his first two podcasts about the boat that they purchased, how he purchased it. So he kind of went through that process and criteria he used for it. And then in the other podcast, we talked about what it's like living far away from your boat. He keeps his boat in Florida. So that's like a 3-hour flight on an airplane from Pittsburgh to Florida. It might even be, it's about 3 hours. So, how does the logistics of that work, et cetera? In this episode, we talk about his trip to the Bahamas and spending several months in the Bahamas and then sailing the boat back to Florida. So that was his first sort of cruise for him and his wife. And we talked about that trip and how it went.
Yeah, and Bela, it's great to have Rob back on the podcast. So I'm glad you invited him. I'm curious to hear how this trip to the Bahamas went, and I think that listeners should be on the lookout for ways to kind of prepare for longer trips and trips to warmer weather. Right, you're out of the Northeast where it's not too hot, right? And some of the surprises that might be more manageable with a little bit of foresight. So maybe we can learn a little bit from Rob's experiences.
Yeah, I hope so, Mike. So let's dive right into my conversation with Rob. Hi, Rob. Welcome to the podcast. How you've been?
I've been great, Bella, though sad to be landlocked at this point.
Yeah. So for listeners, Rob Sweet is this is the third time you've been on the podcast. You were on episode 153 and episode 158. And in those episodes, we talked about living in Pittsburgh, but owning a sailboat. And for those people who don't know U.S. geography, Pittsburgh is several hundred miles away from the Atlantic Ocean or any significant large body of water. And in one of the other episodes, we sort of talked about what it's like living several hundred miles away from your boat. So how do you use it? How do you get stuff done, et cetera? So those were two really interesting episodes. And you recently just got back from a trip to the Bahamas. So I think we're going to talk about that. And this is your second trip to the Bahamas, I believe.
It was really part two of one extended trip. We were there for 2 weeks, flew back here to Pittsburgh to pick up my granddaughter from camp, and we're home for a couple of weeks and then went back for another month.
Got it. So what time of year were you there?
We were there from the middle of June initially for 2 weeks. And then when we went back, it was right around the 10th or so of July, give or take a few days. And we stayed a month. So through about the first week of August.
Yeah. So that's not what I would call the traditional time to go to the Bahamas. So, plenty of people talk about being there in December, January, February, March, April, when it's cold up north. And when the hurricane season is not in session.
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah. Technically, talk about that a little.
Yeah. Technically, hurricane season is June 1 to November
November
30th?
November 1 or November 30th, something like that.
November 1, I think. November 1. But, and so people get scared off, and a lot of people have insurance, especially if their insurance is based out of someplace in the north, that prohibits them from being in the Bahamas during that time frame. But if you actually look at the NOAA website, they have a wonderful website of historical hurricane tracks. The likelihood of a hurricane passing through the Bahamas in June or July or the first 2 weeks of August. So in the past 120 years, it's been maybe 6 that have passed through there in that time frame. So it's very uncommon that time of year. And it's a nice time. So it's a less crowded time because you don't have all the snowbirds and hurricane avoiders. And we picked the kind of northern part of the Bahamas, the Abacos, to cruise, hoping that it would be maybe plenty warm there, but maybe not quite as hot as further south.
Yes. So let's start by getting your boat from, how did you get to the Bahamas? Let's start with that.
Yeah, when we went, I think we covered this in the other episode, but as a reminder,
Yep.
we that was our first big offshore cruise. We had hired a captain that we had worked with to train us, who accompanied us to sail across. We mostly motored about 30 hours straight from Stuart, Florida to Green Turtle Key in the Abacos. And then a couple of days after that, we dropped him off at the airport, let him off, and we proceeded to sail around for the rest of those first 2-week block. And then we put our boat in a small harbor on a mooring ball in Man-o-War Key. That's a very nice protected harbor, and flew home. It's actually interesting because there's no airport in Man-o-War Key. It's much too small. There's a ferry that runs from there to Marsh Harbor, which is the largest city in the Abacos and where the airport is. And so, of course, we're on our boat on a mooring ball, and the ferry nicely came and like backed up to the boat, and we stepped right off our gunnel right onto the back of the ferry.
No, you're kidding.
Yeah.
You're kidding.
No, that's how we did it. We called them and asked them to pick us up at the boat. And when we came back 2 weeks later, we reversed the process as well. Or we flew in, headed out, took a taxi to the ferry, and then had them drive us right up to the boat and step off the back of the ferry up onto our boat.
So when someone says the word ferry, I think of a fairly large vessel,
Yeah.
I don't know, 70, 80, 90 feet long. So describe this ferry.
This inter-island ferry is much smaller. I'm guessing it's in the 25-foot range or 30-foot range. It's it's closer to like a
launch.
A launch, yeah, something of that sort. I mean, it's got an area that's protected, can hold maybe 20 people inside. And
Yes.
there are a lot of these running around in the Abacos, probably other places in the Bahamas as well. The island that we were on, Man-o-War Key, has a very famous boat building family and shop, Albury Boats. And so they make these ferries as well as a lot of center console boats that people like to use down there.
Okay. Oh, wow. I've never heard, the ferry came and picked us up.
It was kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
To toss our bags up, onto the boat when we got back, and
Yeah.
got back. Everything was, the weather had been fine when we were away, so everything was, still tied down tight. Nothing, no problems. It's a very quiet island. The summer is, as I said, it's quieter to start with. Man-o-War Key is, I don't know if it's one of the few, but it's a dry key. No alcohol sold there, so it's not as big a cruiser hotspot as some others. And it's very lovely. So found the boat just fine. The mooring balls held up. There were no storms of any kind, and just proceeded to settle in and get ready for part two.
Yes. So let me ask you a question. So after part one, I mean, it's kind of neat, right? Your very first trip, you go across with a captain, you spend 2 weeks there, then you fly home for a period of time, and then you're going back. So what were the things that you said, gee, we forgot to bring these the first time, and we're going to bring them with us the second time? And what were the things that you said, boy, we didn't need this, and you took them back home?
Really nothing on the we didn't need this. My memory is a little stretched. I think we brought some more fans with us.
Oh,
It
okay.
was hot. It was hot. The air circulation on the boat when it's in the 80s all day and in the evening is not great. And so I think we brought more fans, though at the end of the day, they were not sufficient to really keep us cool. It was pretty uncomfortable when we didn't go to a marina and plug in to run the air conditioning.
Yeah. I can understand that. How it, and the water's warm there too.
Correct.
So,
So the water was lovely, but nothing
Yes.
is cooling you off at night, and the boat heats up when the sun's pounding on it. We did bring back, I think the other thing we obtained and brought back with us was a a sunscreen, like kind of like a tent fly that we then you rigged up over the front of the boat, over the deck to shade it, and still allow wind to come through underneath it into the hatches. So that was a help.
Yeah, you see a lot of those sometimes. Some people drape them over the boom to kind of give you some shade, but still allow a breeze to come through. Now, are you're up there? You're north of the trade winds. Is that true? So you don't always constantly have a breeze, or am I incorrect?
That's true. And in the summer, the breeze fades much more often. So now that was our first day. That wasn't so much of an issue. We had pretty steady, mild winds, 8 to 10 knot winds, not 20 knot trade winds. Our second day, we had some days like that, but we had a lot of days of no wind, and that we were motoring. Though what we discovered, so when the wind dies, sailing's not so good, and the temperatures are uncomfortable, but the snorkeling is fabulous, because you go out into these reefs in the Atlantic or the Sea of Abaco, and the water is as flat and clear as a pool. And so it was a great trade-off. Like, we were very happy to trade a little bit, a few days of less wind with some stunning snorkels.
Yeah. So did you stay mostly in marinas? Did you anchor out? Did you get mooring balls? What sort of worked best?
Yeah.
For you guys?
So we did a blend of marinas and anchoring out, mostly marinas, because we wanted the AC. It was just too uncomfortable. We could anchor out for a night, maybe 2 at most. But it was just, it would feel like it was cooling down, and you get down there and you try and go to sleep, and you were damp and sticky, and everything was damp. Yeah. And so that didn't work out. And since we prefer to anchor out, it inspired us to do the major upgrade we're going to do this fall, which is we're going to add a lot more solar and switch over to lithium, and a lot of lithium, and an inverter, so that we can actually run run the air conditioning off of our batteries when we're on the hook.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. So I've never been there. So you're there sort of in the off season, and remind me how long your boat is. What's the size of your vessel?
38 feet.
38 feet. Approximately how much did it cost you a night to stay at a marina?
I will try and remember. I want to say, I may not remember that well. It's been a minute. So you have, per foot was probably, depending on the marina, only $2 to $3 a foot for a night. And then you have electricity fees, and if you use water, there's water fees. So I'm guessing it was in the $100 to $200 a night range, kind of like hotel costs.
Yeah. Okay. Compared to where I am up in New England, that's cheap.
Yeah, it really wasn't bad in that part of the Bahamas. Nassau, the prices are higher, and in season the prices are higher. But that time of year and that part, most of them were less expensive.
Yeah, up here, sometimes in places that are very much summer-like resorts, in the off season, a lot of things are closed. A lot of restaurants close. A lot of the other sort of facilities closed. Did you find any issues with that, sort of being there in the shoulder season or the off season?
Yeah, we didn't. We had that experience once before, traveling on land to Curacao to, sort of a snorkeling, and everyone had gone away. All the restaurant owners had gone away and so forth. But no, we really weren't finding much that wasn't open. It's still a popular time for people to go across, especially Floridians, right? They have their summer off, and or the kids are off or whatever it is. So a lot of them will go across, and there's the holiday weekends like 4th of July. There's a popular sailing rally in that early July, around the 4th of July, through the Abacos. So it wasn't shut down.
Great.
Yeah, no, it was good. We didn't have one of those experiences where you pull in someplace and you need gas or water, and there's no help to be, had.
Right. Oh, that's great. So, are there talk to me again. I've never been, so talk to me a little bit about how you prepared for this trip. And I know it's too broad of a question, but you live in Pittsburgh, you're driving your car to the airport, you're getting on an airplane, you're landing in Florida, you're getting on your boat, you're going across to the Bahamas. So that's very different than getting in your car, driving for an hour or two and getting to your boat. So how does that change the logistics part of that for you?
Sure. Well, I'll work off. It changes it relative to what I've heard you or other people describe.
Yes. Yes.
Since we haven't had that experience, right, of driving to our boat.
Right.
So, the boat has to be loaded up with its own supply of things, right? There are a lot of things you can't haul back and forth. So you supply the boat. The things that are most difficult for taking back and forth sort of would be tools and things of that sort. And even clothes, we can reduplicate clothing, and it's fortunate because in the tropics you don't need a whole lot of clothing.
Right.
Right. You need to have a couple of bathing suits and several sets of things that dry fast.
Right.
You don't even need shoes really. So so we didn't need to have. So most of what we were bringing was our kit bags and our the few pieces of clothing that we had to wear home from the boat that we wore back with us. And we had ahead of time, we'd loaded up with things like snorkeling gear, wetsuits for the, probably more for the winter season, et cetera, things that are a little bit bulkier to travel with. And then we provisioned in Florida, and we would, shop as well in the Bahamas to stock up on things. We had plenty of opportunity to do that. And I'm trying to think what else would be a major category of stuff you need to have besides, nothing else is really coming to me.
Food and clothes.
Yeah, you got
Right.
that. Water. We have pretty good tankage, so that was set. And then when the one thing we had not obtained before we got to the Bahamas, we had to scout around when we got there, was a Bahamian courtesy flag. You should supposed to fly the flag of the country you're visiting, as well as your own flag. So that one we had a provision while we were there.
And how did you find getting fuel at a marina? How did you find provisioning, getting food and stuff? How often did you find you had to do that in a week?
I think we might have put diesel in once while we were there in the 6 weeks. We have like about 400 to 500 mile range on a tank. So we built up before we left Florida, probably topped off once there. We were maybe used 3/4 of a tank and topped it off again.
Yeah.
And water, we would have to provision, you go through a lot of water just because it's hot and you're
Sure.
So that was easy to find. And then I think I bought, maybe 3 to 6 gallons of gasoline for the dinghy outboard over the course of the time there.
Yep. Yeah. Now, I'm always curious about this. When it comes to water, do you consume the water from your tanks, or did you have some other water that you use for drinking?
No, we use the water from our tanks. So we did, before we left, one of the things we did in Florida was a kind of thorough purge the tanks, refill them with bleach, let them sit, run all the taps, purge them again, and then refill with water. And they stayed really fresh. And then we have inline water filters for our drinking water at the kitchen sink.
Yes.
And that was sufficient to keep it pretty good. I think when we went back after the 2-week layoff, we went to Marina the next day, and my recollection is we drained everything and cleaned it out after it sat for 2 weeks warm.
Yeah. Excellent. So having recently come up the East Coast of the United States this past spring and early summer, I noticed a wide variability in marinas and in the types of facilities they have. It went from some marinas, had beautiful private room showers. They provided towels.
Sure.
And other marinas where it was almost like taking a shower outdoors. and it didn't seem to be a reflection of price. And some had laundry, it cost you $10 to do laundry, and others had laundry for free. So I was curious about the laundry, right? If you're there for a month, you got to go do at least I need to go do laundry a couple of times. How did you find those services?
So I'm going to say something, which is we did laundry, I think, before we left. And we did it. We came home in the middle for 2 weeks. So we got stuff done some things when we came home.
Yes.
But to be honest, when you're in a bathing suit like every day and not much else, you don't go through nearly the same amount of laundry.
Sure.
Now we did have some guests, so we had some extra sets of sheets on the boat. So we saved washing the sheets and towels from our guests until we came back. But there were lots of laundry facilities. They had different arrangements.
Okay.
None were free, as I recall. Most of them either you paid them and they did it for you, or you got coins and put them in the machine. Almost all of them had bathrooms that were available on land and showers. We used those. We tried to use the bathrooms as much as possible, but we love the shower on our boat, so we showered on the boat.
Yeah. So if you were if someone called you up and said, "Hey, Rob, I'm going to be going to the Bahamas next June." So what would your 3 or 5 words of advice or tips be for them?
So assuming that they share some of my interests in like snorkeling, or then I would say I would point them to several different spots or I would sit down and maybe go with them to strategize how can you identify the reefs that are going to be fun to snorkel and the good conditions. And something I had to learn there, I practiced it before I needed it, but you should know how to get back in your dinghy from the water.
Yes.
You really don't want to take your sailboat over and try and anchor or moor near the reefs because it can just go badly, right? It can go very badly. So you're much better off having a long anchor on your dinghy, tossing it down to a sandy spot between some reefs and hopping out. But everyone has to be able to get back in the dinghy. And so I made I made sure I could do it. And then I worked with everyone else to make sure they could do it as well.
Yeah. And I assume you have a traditional inflatable dinghy?
Yeah. So it's not crazy hard, but for people our age, and especially women who may have less upper body strength, or less reach because they're shorter, it can have some complications. So I made sure before someone jumped out in an exposed spot that we in a more unexposed area, and like a shallow area, that we practiced, and if not, they could swim to the beach and get back in.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Beyond that, I would say, obviously one of the things we learned is it's hot. It's easy to push too much and do too much. So just be attentive to not overdoing it. It's really easy to get overheated on land. So it wasn't a primo time of year to think about, I want to do hikes and so forth, unless you have very good heat tolerance.
Right. And how was it? How was getting it through customs? How was that experience, both for you as individuals and the boat?
Yeah. So going over initially, when we took the boat over, very straightforward. They have an online system. You put in the boat information and the passengers, and then when you get to your first port of entry, you have to go to a port of entry before, as your first place you touch land in the Bahamas. You just go over to the office at the dock, and they go through it, and you've done it. You've paid your fees in advance or whatever. It's all pretty easy.
And how much are the fees, Bob? Is it
like just gone up now? They changed the rule. Okay. So before it was like the permit was like a few $100 for a 3-month permit. They've now changed it. I don't remember the exact cost. I think there's a $1,000 and $2,000 permit. One is like a 2-year open-ended. So once you get it, you can go back and forth. Now, the thing that was tricky was when we flew back. So when we had a round trip ticket that went from the Bahamas back to the United States, right? And then from the United States, the round trip was back to the Bahamas. It was so when we went to check in for our flight back to the Bahamas, they were not happy about the idea of us not having a return ticket to the United States because we're leaving our country of citizenship to a foreign country. And I had all my vessel documentation and the fact that I had checked in and the vessel was there to say, hey, no, this is how we're getting back. But and then I think I showed what was fortunate then even more so is that I had a flight from Florida back to Pittsburgh. So I could show them, look, I'm going to be in Florida on this date, right? I'm bringing the boat back, I'm flying back. But so a thing that you might have to do, and if you have guests that are going to fly in and meet you and then you're going to sail back to the States with them, is probably easiest if they buy round trip tickets to the Bahamas and just make sure they can cancel that, or 2 one-way tickets, but make sure that they can cancel one and get refunded. That was a trick. And then the other tricky thing was when my kids flew down to join us. And so now when you fly into the Bahamas and you have to clear passport control and customs coming into the country, so they had round trip tickets. That wasn't the issue getting out of the States, but getting in their place, you know, where are you going to be staying? Give me an address. And they just had like the boat name. I'd given them the boat paper, like a copy of the boat paperwork, but they really wanted them to have an address or place. And I think in the future, I would advise anyone who's going to do that to meet a boat just to give the address of a marina or a hotel and just say, oh yeah, here's what I'm going to be, because they're not going to care. They're not double checking it.
Right. So I'm just curious, when you were flying back there back to the Bahamas, was it the ticket agent that was questioning you about that? And was that in Pittsburgh or was it in Florida?
It was the Pittsburgh ticket agent because and so I wasn't able online to check in. So I had to go to the ticket agent because the computer program stopped me since I didn't have a return in the system. And then I went to the ticket agent, and it's not unlike if you attempt to travel overseas to a country and your passport expires, like while you're overseas, they won't let you get on the plane. So same idea.
Got it. Yeah. And I used to work for a little small airline years and years ago. And I know a couple of people who have since then. And the motivation for that is because if your passport expires or the Bahamas is not going to let you in, then the airline's going to eat the costs for bringing you back.
Okay.
So that's their motivation. They're not being, it's about economics and of course we're going to lose a seat because we got to get this bozo back. So easier to just smooth that over ahead of time. Okay. That's interesting because I helped a friend bring a boat back from Halifax, Nova Scotia back to the States. So I had a one-way ticket and nobody cared.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if in Canada the feelings are different or if it's a different year now. This was 2025 and the world is a different place.
That's true. So, well, that's good observation and good advice for our listeners. Think about that because when you have a boat, you do one way, right? Or you don't know exactly when you're coming back, so you don't buy that ticket until you're closer to that date.
Correct.
Excellent. Let me see. Oh, so other than adding lithium-ion batteries and a big inverter, and so you can run your AC. Any other things you're going to do different on your next trip?
On the boat, or just as in general as cruisers?
Both. Yeah. Start with the boat first, and then let's talk about the cruiser thing.
Yeah. So I was unhappy sailing with the sail configuration I have on this boat. So I have about 130 or 135% Genoa, 90% staysail, and a relatively small mainsail because it's in mast furling, right? And these boats were designed with somewhat shorter masts in general. And the Genoa was large to handle when the wind was stiff. It was kind of too big to handle and uncomfortable. And when the wind was light, which it was a lot while we were there, it wasn't enough to really power the boat. And so when I bought the boat, it had another pair of sails that came with it that we haven't used, that the previous owners had. So it has a 110% laminate Jenny. I'm not sure what kind of laminate. I think it's cruising laminate, so it's probably more functional. And I think I'm going to put that on. We're going to go back this winter, so it should blow more. So I don't, when it's blowing, that'll be plenty of sail. And I think it might, and then I think I'll evaluate how it works on light air days, but it probably won't be much worse. And the more likely thing is that we'll have to add some sort of code 0 or similar cruising sail to the front, so that we'd have basically, we never use them at the same time, but we'd have 3 head sails.
Yeah. Nice.
So that's for the boat. That other thing could be a future boat upgrade. And I think we're going to expand the rails so that in the back there are rails, and then you have lifelines that go forward, right? And I think we're going to expand how far forward the rails go, so we have a little bit more territory, so we can put a grill on and
oh yes,
maybe move the lifeboat mount to the rail. So some things of that sort.
Yeah. But all in all, it sounds like it was a wonderful trip.
It was it was adventure of a lifetime, total thrill. Every day we'd pinch ourselves and say, are we really doing this? And, in the Abacos, I would say, I looked at what we did. Most of our sails were anywhere from 5 miles to 15 miles, right? Maybe 20. And you'd go from place to place, different snorkel spots, wonderful hidden little bays with, crazy little beach bar hideaways, a blue hole. We went to snorkel over a blue hole, which was pretty wild. I had no idea how far down it goes. We're not the sort of people who dive down and see where you end up. But it was easy to get, most of those stretches were easy. And then when we came home, we broke up. Instead of doing one long sail, 130, nautical miles, we just island hopped all the way back. So we did, 20, then we did like halfway across to a small island where we anchored out for the night, 50, and then we did like a 70 or 80 mile stretch across the Gulf back to Stewart. And the intimidating Gulf Stream was as flat as a lake or a pool. It was beautiful still water when we went back. So no wind. We had a motor, but it wasn't scary. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. As I always say, people say, well, what do you do when you're sailing when the weather's bad? And I say, I don't sail in bad weather.
We got caught in one squall, not a big wind squall, just a lot of rain. We were motoring to a very tricky harbor, like a lot of these harbors have very shallow spots and entries, and so you have to be careful getting in. And it was basically a whiteout. We could see about 50 feet in front of us. We just basically stopped the boat, just kind of went around in circles out in the middle of the water, kept an eye out for other boats until it passed, and then headed in. But that was the worst piece of weather we hit. Not too bad. Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your adventure with the listeners. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. And we're going to do another podcast together, I think also. So listeners, keep on the lookout. There'll be at least one more from Rob.
Wow, Bela, interesting trip, interesting interview. What were your key takeaways?
As I was chatting with Rob, one of the things that sort of cropped into my brain is this notion is that, as with many things that's in life, it's not as difficult as you think it is. It might be a lot of work, but don't co-mingle a lot of work with it being difficult. Those are separate, can be separate different things. So point being, it's not as difficult to sail over to the Bahamas. It's not as difficult as you might think to figure out what to do and how to do it. And the number of resources we have these days is just incredible, even compared to 20 or 30 years ago. Not just from the technology of navigating and things like that, but places to go, what the process is for immigration, what the process is for checking into a country, coming back to the United States, things like that. So I thought that was sort of made me think about that a little bit. Be brave. If you're thinking about doing a trip, go ahead and do the trip. And it'll be a lot of fun, and it won't be as difficult as you think it might be. Number two, I thought the interesting point was Rob and his wife went to sort of the Bahamas during what I describe as the shoulder season. The peak season in the Bahamas is probably January, February, March. That's sort of, it's difficult to charter a boat. Anchorages are crowded. All the charter folks come in on Sunday. They leave on Saturday. So all the boats leave the marina on Sunday evening or Sunday afternoon. They all go, because they can only go so far. They all go to the same anchorage, etc. So he went there in the shoulder season. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And that's something that you don't hear a lot of people talk about. And Rob certainly said that their experience was just fine. And it was more than fine because the weather was still great. And a lot of the facilities and like the restaurants and the marinas, anchorages, picking up a mooring ball, they weren't crowded. They had no problem. So I thought those were a couple of my takeaways. So Mike, was there anything that struck you about Rob's trip?
Well, I thought the whole immigration piece was interesting. As kind of somebody who spends a lot of time going through customs in various countries, traveling around a lot, and on a boat, it's just a whole different kind of dynamic. What was it like when you went to Canada? Right, because you came back from Nova Scotia. Did you have any difficulties there? And kind of maybe you could compare your experience going to Canada versus Rob's experience going into the Bahamas.
Yeah, so there's two elements to that. Going to Canada was easy, right? I got on, in my situation, I flew from Albany, New York to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And then I took a boat back from Halifax back to here. And then there was a little bit of people going, hey, you just got a one-way ticket. So, and that was more on the Canada side. When I landed in Canada, they were like, I remember talking to the immigration official. He said, okay, so you bought a one-way ticket. How are you going back? And I explained to them, I was meeting a person here on a boat, and it was fine. So there was no issue with that. But they did ask the question. So, be prepared. The other interesting thing, and leaving the country was you have to check out. Now you had to check out both us, the people, the individuals, the three of us that were on the boat. We have to say we're leaving the country, just like you do when you're doing it on an airplane. You have to go to contact customs, tell them you're leaving. There's also the boat. So you got to check in the boat and you got to check out the boat, because countries tax these things, and they don't want a boat being imported into a country without them collecting the taxes and tariffs and et cetera, if that boat's going to stay there. So there's two elements to this. There's how long you can stay as an individual and how long your vessel can stay. And so both of those you have to sort of understand.
Where did that process take place, and at which point in time did you have to check the boat in and out?
So I was not there for the boat check-in because the boat was already there. When we left Nova Scotia, we did it electronically.
Okay.
So we told them, because we went from Halifax, we departed Halifax, and before we left the dock, oh no, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Before we departed Halifax, the captain called up. It's always the captain, whoever the captain is. The captain called up the immigration folks, and then the boat checkout people, whatever office it was. I'm sorry, I just don't know. I was not involved in that process, so I don't know the office. that he called. And sometimes they come to the boat and they want to look at the boat and they want to look at you. And sometimes they just do everything. They say, fine, you're right. You give them their passport numbers.
Halifax. There's these people in Halifax. They come to the dock. Okay. Interesting.
Yes. Halifax is a big port. So, right. They do that.
But
sometimes they come to the dock.
You didn't like stop near the border at the first town, right? That was in the US to check in.
No. Okay. Oh, now checking in to the country was different. So there's an app that you can put on your phone, CPT or something like that. I'd have to,
Customs and Border Pro, CBP, Customs and Border Protection.
And with that app, we took pictures of our passports. This is while we're in the ocean. We took pictures of our passports, and we told them we were coming into Boston, on the boat, and we gave them the registration information on the boat, and we emailed it off to them. And, like 2 days before we thought we would get there, and they responded back. They said, you're all set. You're fine.
Nice. So kind of pre-cleared. Yeah.
Right. So we got pre-cleared. So we didn't have to stop. We didn't have to stop into a port that had an immigration facility for them to come and check us or anything like that. But, that probably depends where you're coming from and where you're at. And,
if you're coming from Latin America, probably, or a Caribbean island, right, where there's a lot of drug trade, they're going to be a little more careful, obviously.
Right. So it was pretty easy. But here again, point being is this may sound overwhelming, but the information is out there. And you may have to go to planning 2 or 3 or 4 information sources to get the accurate information. Be careful of forums and Facebook. They're good, but they're not always 100% accurate. Oftentimes, if you can go to the actual immigration website or Coast Guard, government website, you're going to get accurate information, hopefully. But anyway, multiple sources, source your information, and you can figure it out. That's the point here, is that it's not overwhelming. And a lot of these things you can do electronically now, which makes it super easy.
Yep. So know what apps you need and do your homework ahead of time, right? It sounds to me like one of the more stressful things is this idea of customs, and knowing the rules and being prepared with the right apps and the right documents will make it a whole lot easier, right? That's a huge takeaway, I think, from today. Right.
And, I used to travel a ton back when I was working. And one of the things I learned was that don't assume that the immigration official has a sense of humor. So don't try to be a comedian. Just be serious and professional. That's my one word of advice. Don't think you're a comedian.
As somebody who spent a lot of time in front of immigration officers, serious, facts, answer the question. Here's the other thing. Listen carefully to the question that they ask you and answer that question and only that question.
Yes.
Right? This is another important. And one of the things I've learned here in Germany too, that it's really important to have all your documents organized. And this works whether I'm in Germany or the US. But this idea that if I pull out a folder with all the documents in it, and they're like, okay, this person is competent, right? And and I'm less likely to be suspicious, which is kind of interesting. So so yeah, I think these are some really good takeaways for people. And I agree. Once you do it a few times, it's not scary at all. And I think I would imagine the first few times that you're doing that, it's a little frightening and overwhelming, but there's a system, and there's, like you said, the information is available. The key is to do your homework and be prepared and be over prepared in that sense. And shouldn't have anything problem. If you don't have anything to hide, right, and you're not doing anything illegal, and that's what you're thinking about, it makes it a lot easier to go through this, right? You have nothing to hide. Don't be worried. Whatever they want to see on the boat, they can see.
Right.
If you do have something to hide, this is not the right podcast for you, and I'm not here to give you any advice on that. Just to be 100% clear, Bela.
Now, the other thing, particularly with a boat, they're going to ask you questions about what kind of stuff you have on the boat, and some countries are very strict about what kind of vegetables, what kind of meat, what kind of produce you can bring into a country and out of a country. So here again, that's something that you need to figure out and understand. Again, information's available, but so don't think of only the obvious things that most people think of: drugs and guns. Clearly, those are verboten in most places in the world. But there's other things that countries get very concerned about: fruits, vegetables, meat,
Yep.
produce,
Generally
things
not
like
allowed. Even a ham sandwich, right? Or
That's
an
right.
apple, you have to be super careful of. So that is good to know those rules so that you can kind of plan accordingly. And when you are getting close, if you've got to make sure that you've eaten all of whatever this type of food that's not allowed, that's great.
That's
Because
right.
it's not that the value of the food that you're throwing away, but it's the time that it takes, right, to go through all that process. If you can honestly say, yes, we have no more fresh vegetables or no more. I know that you're not allowed to bring meat. We have no fresh meat on board anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Canned stuff is
so-
usually fine. So
Canned is fine.
things-
Absolutely. Processed is fine.
Right.
Just fresh that they're
Right.
worried about.
Just
Typically.
fresh
And each
stuff.
country is different, but I know with Canada, that's the case. And between Europe and here, if you're going across. So
Right.
that's a really good point. Worth checking on.
All right. What do you think, Mike? Wrap this one up?
Sure. Listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. And we hope you found our conversation with Rob interesting and thought-provoking. And as always, please feel free to contact us via email at sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoy the podcast, hit that follow or like button on your app. And you can also find our podcast now on YouTube. And if you know of someone that would make a good guest for the show, let us know. We're always looking for interesting people to chat with. So that's it for today's episode. I hope to see you out there soon. Take care, and signing off from upstate New York.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks for listening. See you next time. Auf Wiedersehen.